kind man became the father he never knew a boy needed. It started out as something simple, routine, almost forgettable. I'd leave my house by 7 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, car engine warming to life with the same rhythm each weekday. That was my flow. I'm a systems guy, punctual, predictable, and not one for unnecessary conversation before 9 a.m. But life has a funny way of sneaking in meaning where you least expect it. Jeremy entered my life without any grand entrance. No fanfare, just a knock at my gate one morning, 6:30 a.m. sharp. He stood there, small backpack slung over his shoulder, neatly dressed in his uniform, and a hesitant smile on his face. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. Good morning, sir. My mom said you were driving to town and could drop me at school. It caught me off guard. His voice was polite and his eyes hopeful. I remembered his mom mentioning it briefly in passing at the apartment block a few days earlier. Something about her work schedule, the school being along my route, and how she hated to ask but had no other option. I nodded. Hop in. That was it. No small talk, just a lift. But then it happened again. The next morning and the one after that. Like clockwork, Jeremy would be at the gate by 6:30 a.m., standing patiently, sometimes reading a book, sometimes just quietly waiting. Never late, never complaint. I started to expect him. I didn't know much about his home life. I'd never spoken to his mother again after that one time. She left before sunrise, returned after dark, and kept mostly to herself. Our paths rarely crossed. But Jeremy's presence grew familiar. Comforting even. He was a quiet kid, thoughtful, the kind who watched the world instead of talking about it. Every morning, he'd greet me the same way. Good morning, sir. And every drop-off at school ended with a cheerful, thank you, Dad, followed by a quick hug and a dash through the school gates. That part confused me. The first time he said it, I laughed nervously, thinking it was just a slip. Why'd he call me Dad? I asked him one morning, about 2 weeks into our new routine. He looked up from his seat in the passenger side, blinking with complete innocence. I don't know my real dad. Mom says he's somewhere, but she doesn't know where. Oh, I replied, unsure what to say. Jeremy continued, but I see you like my dad. In school, everyone's dad drops them off. And you drop me off. I stared at the road for a long time after that. His words sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and unshakable. I didn't have any kids of my own, never really thought about fatherhood outside of casual hypotheticals. Yet here was this child assigning me the role of something I never volunteered for, but now couldn't ignore. From that day, I started seeing things differently. I began asking about his schoolwork, his favorite subjects, the books he read. He opened up slowly, like pages of a well-worn novel, revealing little details of a world that wasn't just quiet but lonely. Then came that Friday. The air felt different that morning. Jeremy wasn't his usual self. He didn't say much. No good morning, sir. Just a polite nod and silence. I didn't push at first. I figured maybe he didn't sleep well or had a test coming up. But as the silence stretched, I glanced over. You okay? I asked. He shrugged. Just tired. But I wasn't buying it. I slowed the car a little. Something on your mind? He hesitated, then spoke, voice small and flat. There's a meeting at school on Monday. A big one. For parents. I nodded. Okay. Did your mom say she's coming? She can't, he replied. She works early on Monday. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Not frustration, just quiet sadness. Everyone's parents will be there. Their moms and dads. But I'll be alone. The silence returned, but now it wasn't peaceful. It was thick with something unspoken. A child trying to process adult expectations and the reality that sometimes grown-ups simply can't be there, even when you need them most. I wanted to promise him I'd be there. I wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but I didn't. I dropped him off like always. He said bye, Dad, but this time there was no hug. No smile, just a wave that felt heavier than any backpack. That weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I found myself checking my calendar repeatedly. Monday morning was clear. I had no meetings scheduled until the afternoon. Still, I debated with myself. Was I crossing a line? But when Monday came and I saw him walk into the school, dragging his feet with his shoulders hunched, something in me clicked. I couldn't let him face that room alone. At 9 a.m., I drove back to his school. And that's where everything started to change. When I pulled into the school parking lot that morning, I wasn't sure what to expect. A sea of SUVs and minivans had already taken up most of the spots. Parents in business suits and yoga gear streamed into the main entrance. I felt out of place, like I was stepping into a life that wasn't mine. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about me. Inside, the halls were buzzing. Kids ran between classes, staff coordinated last-minute details, and a few teachers greeted parents warmly as they entered the multi-purpose room. I scanned the crowd for Jeremy. No sign of him yet. I slipped into the back of the room and took a seat near the exit, hoping to blend in. But that wasn't meant to last. "Jeremy!" a child's voice shouted. I turned just as a boy pointed across the room. "Look, your dad's here." Heads turned. Teachers looked confused. Jeremy froze in place. His eyes met mine, wide, unbelieving. He stood still for a heartbeat, and then he ran. Full speed. Backpack bouncing behind him, cheeks flushed, and that spark of joy that only a child knows when hope is restored. He flung his arms around me without hesitation. "I thought you couldn't come," he whispered. "I figured your mom might be busy," I replied. "So I thought I'd come instead, if that's okay with you." He nodded quickly, gripping my hand with a fierceness I wasn't prepared for. We walked in together, and every curious glance we received no longer mattered. For Jeremy, it was enough that someone showed up. The meeting itself was typical. Talk of curriculum updates, upcoming field trips, and fundraising goals. But as we sat there, I noticed how he leaned into me, how he proudly introduced me to his teacher as my dad. And when other kids saw him smiling, they started treating him differently too. It dawned on me that for all the adults in the room, it was just another school function. But for Jeremy, it was proof he belonged. After the meeting, we walked out into the sunlight. He was grinning ear to ear. "I was scared you wouldn't come," he admitted. "I kept hoping you would, but I didn't want to get disappointed." I kneeled to his eye level. "You matter, Jeremy. I might not be your real dad, but if you need someone to show up, I will. Deal?" He didn't answer with words, just a nod and another hug. That made 3 hugs in one day from a kid who barely spoke during our morning rides. I dropped him back at class and left quietly. That afternoon, something shifted inside me. I found myself looking at the calendar for the next school event. I started wondering what Jeremy might need for his upcoming science project. I even texted a colleague to ask where I could find a decent lunchbox. Something a little cooler than the beat-up one Jeremy carried every day. It was more than kindness. It was care, real care. But the next morning, everything changed again. I waited by the gate like always. 6:30 came and went. No Jeremy. By 6:50, I walked over to their door and knocked. A neighbor opened it and shook her head. He already left. Said he had something important to do at school. I felt my stomach twist. Jeremy never left without me. Ever. I got in the car, drove toward the school, and tried to shake the unease crawling through my chest. Had I done something wrong? Had his mother said something to him? Or worse, had he overheard someone say something about us? When I pulled up to the school gate, the security guard greeted me with familiarity. "Jeremy's already inside," he said. I nodded and turned to leave, but something tugged at me. I walked back in, asked the receptionist if I could speak to the principal. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a small office with pale blue walls, a desk lined with paperwork, and an older woman in glasses who looked both kind and weary. She gestured for me to sit. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said gently. I stiffened. "Is something wrong?" She smiled. "Not all. Quite the opposite, in fact." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were notes from Jeremy's teachers, counselors, and even other parents. Comments about how much he'd changed, how he smiled more, participated in class, made friends. "All of them say the same thing," she said, sliding the papers across. "Ever since you started dropping him off, he's become a different boy. Happier, stronger." I was speechless. "We know you're not his biological father," she added, "but we've seen what you've become to him." I left the school that day, not just as a man who gave a boy a ride to class, but as someone who accidentally became a hero in a child's life. But as I drove away, a question haunted me. What happens when a bond like this becomes too real to walk away from? The next morning, Jeremy was at the gate like nothing had changed. "Hey, Dad," he said with a smile that barely masked the fatigue in his eyes. "Thanks for yesterday." I ruffled his hair, opened the car door, and watched as he climbed in like we'd been doing this forever. But something was different today. He didn't say much on the drive. Usually, he'd hum under his breath, ask me random questions about road signs or the weather. Today, he just stared out the window. "You okay?" I asked finally. He hesitated. "Mom came home late last night." I nodded, encouraging him to go on. She was really mad. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. She said people might start talking, that you're not my real dad, and I shouldn't confuse people. I didn't know how to respond at first. My instinct was to defend myself, but that wouldn't help Jeremy. "What did you say to her?" He turned to me, eyes wide and honest. I said, "I know you're not my dad, but you make me feel like I have one." I had to blink quickly to stop the burn behind my eyes. He was just a kid, 8, maybe 9, and yet he carried that kind of wisdom in his chest. We arrived at school, and I told him to be good, as always. He nodded, then turned back before walking in. "Will you still come tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his mother. I'd only seen her twice in the 2 months since I started driving Jeremy. Once early in the morning, when she was hurrying out with her phone clutched to her ear, and another time when I caught a glimpse of her silhouette in the kitchen window late at night. We had never exchanged words, but something told me we needed to. The next evening, I returned early from work and decided to walk over. The front porch light flickered as I knocked. I heard footsteps, the clink of a chain unlocking, and then the door opened. She stood in the doorway, just as surprised to see me as I was to finally meet her up close. She looked tired, like life had pressed too hard against her shoulders for too long. She was dressed in scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Yes?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Hi, I know who you are," she interrupted. There was an awkward silence. "I just wanted to thank you," she said finally, "for helping Jeremy. He talks about you all the time." I nodded. "He's a great kid." She crossed her arms, guarded. "Look, I work a lot. 2 jobs. Sometimes 3. It's not that I don't care. It's just hard. You know?" "I get it," I said gently. "I'm not here to judge." She studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. "You want to come in?" The living room was modest. Old furniture, some toys stacked in a corner, and pictures of Jeremy scattered around. But it was clean and warm. She offered me tea, which I declined, and we sat. "I know he calls you Dad," she said, almost offensively. "I didn't teach him that." "I know," I said. "He told me why." She exhaled, as though waiting for me to scold her. But I didn't. Instead, I said he sees something in me, something he wishes he had. I'm not trying to replace anyone, but I don't want to disappoint him either. She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "He's had a rough time," she murmured. "His father left before he turned 2. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. That explained a lot. You should have seen his face when you showed up at that school meeting," she said quietly. He couldn't stop talking about it. We talked for over an hour, not about anything dramatic, just Jeremy, his habits, his favorite cereal, how he hates math but loves art. I realized we were 2 strangers joined by one small boy who needed more than either of us alone could give. As I got up to leave, she looked at me with a mix of uncertainty and vulnerability. "Do you plan to keep being part of his life?" I paused at the door. "Yes," I said simply, and I meant it. That night, I found myself looking through old boxes in my garage, pulling out things from when I used to volunteer at youth programs. Board games, picture books, science kits. I cleaned them, boxed them again, and left them on their porch the next morning with a note. For Jeremy. From a guy who's proud to be called Dad. But something else was stirring inside me. Because even as I stepped deeper into Jeremy's world, I realized I was stepping out of my own comfort zone. My routines, my boundaries, my carefully crafted solitude. And I had no idea where this road was leading. All I knew was, this wasn't just about kindness anymore. This was becoming family. The first I heard of the school trip was on a Thursday afternoon, just after I'd picked up Jeremy from school. He was unusually animated, his small backpack bouncing as he hopped into the car. "They announced it today," he said breathlessly, gripping the edge of his seat. Announce what? Our school trip. We're going to the nature reserve. 2 whole days. We'll be hiking, and there'll be a campfire, and tents, and marshmallows, and... He paused, catching his breath. Parents are invited too. I smiled. Sound exciting. Yeah. His voice dropped slightly. They said we need a signed permission slip and a parent to come along. Or someone responsible. He looked at me, hopeful. Would you? There was again that quiet longing in his eyes, like he was trying not to ask too much, but couldn't help himself. I didn't hesitate. Of course. I'd love to go. The grin that broke across his face could have lit up the whole city. The following days were filled with chatter about the trip. Jeremy began calling it our adventure. He even brought me a flyer from school with a hand-drawn map of the reserve and a checklist of what to bring. Don't forget bug spray, he warned solemnly. Last year, when the kids got bitten so bad, he swelled up like a balloon. Duly noted, I laughed. The night before the trip, I found myself staring at my packed bag, feeling both nervous and oddly excited. It had been years since I'd gone anywhere resembling a camp. But this wasn't about tents or nature trails. This was about Jeremy, and something in my gut told me this trip would change things. Friday morning arrived with the scent of fresh dew and a sky brushed in soft gray. Parents clustered in groups near the school buses, chatting casually. Jeremy tugged my hand, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Come on, Dad. I saved us seats. I caught a few sideways glances at the title. Dad, but no one said anything. In fact, a few people nodded or smiled as we walked by. On the bus, Jeremy introduced me to his best friend Malik and a girl named Serena who kept her stuffed panda in her backpack. Everyone, this is my dad, Jeremy said proudly. And just like that, I wasn't an outsider anymore. The ride was filled with laughter and chaos, kids singing off-key and trading snacks. Jeremy leaned his head on my shoulder halfway through and dozed off. I stayed still the entire time, afraid to wake him, letting the moment settle over me like a warm blanket. At the reserve, the kids scattered like birds, led by cheery guides in green vests. Jeremy stuck to my side, clutching the trail map and pretending to be our navigator. We walked winding paths under tall pines, skipped rocks across a glistening creek, and even caught sight of a deer in the distance. He gasped and whispered, "You think Mom would have liked this?" "I think she would," I said quietly. We didn't speak more about her, but I felt it, a soft understanding between us that some things hurt too deeply to say out loud. That night, around the campfire, the kids roasted marshmallows while the adults sipped cocoa from tin cups. Someone brought out a guitar. Jeremy sat cross-legged next to me, poking the fire with a stick. "Thanks for coming," he said suddenly, eyes reflecting the flames. "Thanks for inviting me. I don't think I've ever had a trip like this before. Not with someone staying just for me." That line stayed with me. Not with someone staying just for me. Later, when the children crawled into their tents and the air grew colder, I sat awake beneath the stars, thinking about that. How many times had this little boy waited for someone to stay, only to be let down? And how close had I come to walking away, too? Just before dawn, I was jolted awake by a teacher's urgent voice. "We can't find Jeremy." Panic ripped through my chest as I jumped to my feet. Teachers fanned out, flashlights slicing through the darkness. I raced down the path we had taken the day before, heart thundering in my ears. Finally, near the edge of the clearing by the creek, I saw a small figure huddled on a fallen log. Jeremy! I ran to him, relief crashing over me. "What are you doing out here?" He looked up, eyes red but calm. "I had a dream," he whispered, "that you left. Like Dad did. I had to make sure you were still here." I knelt and took his face in my hands. "I'm not going anywhere." He collapsed into me, arms wrapped tight, trembling. And I knew then. This wasn't just a school trip. It was a vow. One that would follow me long after the fire burned out and the tents came down. It was the Wednesday after the trip when I heard a soft knock at my front door just past 6 a.m. The sky was still steel gray, and I hadn't even reached for my coffee. I opened it to find Jeremy, standing alone, cradling something in his hands. "Hey," I said, surprised. "You're early." He looked up, unsure. I need your help." He handed me a folded sheet of paper. Crayon-colored, unevenly written, but legible. "Parent-teacher special visit day. Friday. I scanned it. A brief note at the bottom read, "Each student may invite a parent or guardian to sit in class, meet the teacher, and share a favorite story." "I want you to come," he said quickly. "Not just to sit in, but to tell a story." Me? I blinked. "What kind of story?" He looked at his shoes. "They asked us to pick someone who inspires us. And I picked you." The words landed with the softness of a whisper and the weight of a lifetime. My throat tightened. "I'd be honored," I said. Friday couldn't come fast enough, though the weight of it grew heavier with each passing hour. I wasn't Jeremy's father, not by blood, not on paper. I had never stood in a school hallway as anyone's parent. What if I wasn't enough? Still, Friday arrived. We walked into the school building side by side. Jeremy beamed, his backpack bouncing, a silent echo of our earlier mornings together. But this time it was different. This time I was stepping inside, not just watching from the curb. The classroom buzzed with excitement. Tiny desks lined up like miniature parade floats. On the board, the teacher had written, "Our heroes, who they are, what they teach us." Parents and guardians clustered in corners. Some with coffee, some holding hands with their kids, a few fumbling nervously with papers. I spotted Malik and his father. Serena's mom wore a sunflower pin in her hair. But Jeremy pulled me forward confidently. He had made a space for me. His name scribbled across the corner of 2 chairs. "I told Miss Hayworth you were coming. She was happy," he said. "She likes you. She saw you at the trip." The teacher called us to attention. "Today," she announced, "we're celebrating the people who make us feel safe, who help us grow, and who inspire us to be our best selves." One by one, children stood with trembling voices and proud smiles. A dad who was a firefighter, a grandmother who'd taught 4 generations, a sister who helped raise her baby brother. Then it was Jeremy's turn. He stood up slowly, glancing at me, then back to the class. "This is my dad," he said without hesitation. "His name is Mr. Thomas. He's not really my dad like by blood or stuff, but he shows up for me. Every day, he takes me to school. He came on the trip, and when I feel sad, he knows. He doesn't yell. He listens. And he's here now." Silence. Then soft claps, followed by one of the kids saying, "That's awesome." The teacher smiled and nodded at me. "Would you like to share your story, Mr. Thomas?" I stood, knees suddenly weak. But Jeremy looked at me with such open faith, I knew I had to speak. I told them about growing up without a father myself, about being the kid who never had someone in the audience, about how I never imagined I'd get to be that person for someone else. "I thought kindness was something you gave in passing," I said, "but I'm learning it can change everything when you give it a home." The teacher dabbed her eye. Jeremy grinned up at me like I'd just scored the winning goal at the Super Bowl. After class, parents filtered out. Some nodded at me with new eyes. Others stopped to shake my hand. One woman murmured, "You're doing something really special." Jeremy was uncharacteristically quiet on the way home. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "That story," he said. "About kindness." "I like that." We pulled up to his house, and for the first time his mother was home. She stood in the doorway, weary-eyed, purse still on her shoulder. She looked startled to see me. Jeremy ran up the walkway, but paused halfway. "Mom, this is Mr. Thomas. I mean, Dad." The woman blinked, as if unsure whether to correct him. Then she looked at me, really looked, and something shifted in her gaze. "Thank you," she said. Just 2 words, but they held exhaustion, gratitude, maybe even apology. That night, after dinner, I kept replaying the day in my mind. It wasn't the speech. It wasn't the classroom applause. It was that moment Jeremy claimed me, out loud, in front of everyone, without fear. The next morning, he didn't knock. He simply opened the gate, walked up to the car, and slid in like he always had. But something had changed. He didn't just call me Dad anymore. Now, I finally believed him. The following week began like most. Jeremy was at the gate by 6:30 a.m., bag slung over his shoulder, that same quiet excitement in his step. But Wednesday morning brought a storm. Not of rain, but of truth. We were halfway through our drive when I asked a question I'd been sitting on since Parent-Teacher Day. "Jeremy, does your mom know you call me Dad?" He paused. The silence swelled between us. Then he answered, "She never asked. And I never told her. I glanced at him. Would she be okay with it? Jeremy shrugged, but it wasn't the careless kind. It was the kind you give when the answer is too tangled to explain. She's tired a lot, always working. I don't think she'd care. Or maybe she'd care too much. His words unsettled me. That afternoon, I decided to knock on her door. It was the first time I'd seen her up close. Slim, well-kept, but weary in a way that ran deeper than sleep deprivation. She looked surprised to see me. "Hi," I said, unsure how to begin. "I'm Mr. Thomas. I know who you are," she cut in, not rudely, but firmly. "Jeremy talks about you every day." That stopped me. "Oh," I said. "He never mentioned that." She leaned on the doorframe. "He calls you Dad." "I know," I replied gently. A long pause. "He started doing that a few weeks in. I wanted to stop him. But the way he talks about you," he lights up. "It's like you stepped into a role he's been waiting for his whole life. How could I take that away from him?" Her voice cracked at the end, like a wall trying not to collapse. We sat on her front porch. For the first time, I heard her story. She was 22 when she had Jeremy. The father vanished when she was pregnant. No calls, no goodbye. She worked night shifts, cleaned offices, ran deliveries, took online classes in her spare time. Life became a maze of surviving and pretending she wasn't breaking down. He would always ask, "Where's Daddy?" she said, and I never had an answer that didn't sound like a lie or an apology. There was a long silence between us. "I never asked for help," she added, "but somehow he found it. In you." I looked away, suddenly overwhelmed. "Thank you," she said, but I couldn't say you're welcome. It felt too small. I said, "You changed me too, you know." The next day, as we drove to school, Jeremy was chipper again. "I told Mom you visited," he said. "She said she likes you." Well, I smiled. I like her too. Jeremy grinned in that knowing, grown-up way kids sometimes do when they're years ahead of their age. That Friday, I picked him up from school because his mom had a double shift. He tossed his backpack in the back seat and buckled up without a word. But halfway through the drive, he asked, "Did my real dad ever ask about me?" I wasn't ready for that. "No, ien suera trutfuli. But that doesn't mean you weren't worth asking about." He looked out the window for a long time. Then he said softly, "I'm glad I picked you." It was a sentence so simple, so sincere, I nearly pulled over just to let the tears happen. That weekend, I invited them both, Jeremy and his mother, over for dinner. It was awkward at first. She offered to help set the table, and I insisted she relax. Jeremy bounced between rooms like a puppy, so excited that two parts of his world were finally overlapping. Midway through dinner, I noticed how easily she laughed. How Jeremy looked at her with pride. How he looked at me with belonging. Later that night, as they got ready to leave, Jeremy hugged me the way he always did. But this time he added a whisper, "You're my real dad. You just came late." After they left, I sat on the porch in the dark, silence wrapped around me like a blanket. Something had shifted, permanently. I realized then that being called Dad wasn't about biology or legality. It was about consistency, kindness, presence. It was about choosing to show up, even when you didn't have to. But I also knew something else. Jeremy's real father had been silent for nearly a decade. What if he came back? That thought clung to the edge of my mind like a shadow, refusing to lift. What if one day a man showed up with blood in his veins and a birth certificate in hand? What would I be then? The week after the dinner felt different. Jeremy's routine didn't change. He was still at my gate at 6:30 sharp, school bag slung over one shoulder, shoes dusted from walking along the sidewalk. But his mood had lightened. There was an ease to him now. He hummed when we drove. He asked me if I liked music from the olden days, which apparently meant anything before 2015. We laughed more, and his mother, whom I had only known in passing glances before, began waving each morning. Sometimes, if she wasn't already rushing off to work, she brought Jeremy to the gate herself, coffee in hand, hair pulled into a tight bun. We'd chat briefly. Her name was Maya. I learned she loved poetry but hadn't written a word in years. I had no plans, no expectations, only gratitude. Then came a knock on my door. Not from Jeremy, not from Maya. A man stood there, tall, nervous. He looked like someone who carried too much history in his eyes. "Are you the one who takes Jeremy to school?" he asked. I felt my stomach tighten. Yes, I said, slowly. Can I help you? He hesitated, then handed me a photo. It was old, faded, and it was Maya, pregnant, and him. I'm Jeremy's father, he said. My silence was immediate. Not angry, not defensive, just heavy. I just got back into the country, he continued. I've been gone a long time. I remembered what Maya told me. Gone was a kind word. I didn't come to cause trouble, he added. I just want to meet my son. I didn't know what to say. I offered him a seat. He refused. I just needed to see who he's been with, he said. To know he was okay. He's more than okay, I replied. The man nodded. I can see that. Then he left. I stood there, frozen for a while. That evening, when I dropped Jeremy at home, I saw Maya's eyes shift when I told her. He came, I said simply. She closed her eyes. I figured he might. Are you okay? I will be, she replied. As long as Jeremy is. We didn't tell him. Not yet. The next morning, Jeremy was unusually quiet. He didn't sing. He didn't ask questions. I assumed it was school stress, but halfway to the school gate, he turned to me. Do you know someone named Nathaniel? I blinked. Why? There was a man at the house yesterday. He left before I saw him, but I heard Mom talking to Aunt Carla on the phone. She said, Nathaniel's back. He pulled over. Jeremy, I said gently, Nathaniel is your biological father. His mouth dropped slightly. He didn't cry, but he didn't speak either. He came to check on you, to see if you were safe. Jeremy looked away, then finally asked, Is he going to take me away? No, I said, not unless your mom says so, and not unless you want that. He nodded slowly, but the fear was still there. A few days passed. The air cleared. Then came Friday. Jeremy didn't show up. I waited until 6:45, then drove to his house. His mother opened the door with swollen eyes. He has to stay home, she said softly. Because of Nathaniel? Yes. Do you want me to talk to him? She nodded. I found Jeremy sitting on the floor in his room, building something with Legos. He didn't look up. Do I have to call him Dad? No, I said. Even if he's my real dad, there are all kinds of real Jeremy. The ones who give you life, and the ones who show up for it. He finally looked at me. Can I call you both something different? I chuckled. Like what? He smiled shyly. Maybe you could be Pops. And he can be Mr. Nathaniel. Deal, I said, shaking his hand. The next week, Nathaniel came again. He didn't try to force anything. Just sat with Jeremy. Talked. Left. He started sending books. Called occasionally, but never crossed the line. And Jeremy? He still came to my gate at 6:30 every morning. But now, when I dropped him off at school, he said, Thanks, Pops. I realized then, fatherhood isn't claimed. It's earned. It's not just DNA. It's time, listening, protecting the heart of a child who trusts you enough to call you their own. 3 months later, Jeremy stood at the front of the school's spring assembly. I want to thank the person who shows up for me, he said into the mic. The one who's there when it rains, when I forget my lunch, when I just need someone to talk to. I call him Pops, because he earned that. He looked at me from the stage, eyes shining. Everyone clapped. But I just smiled, because in that moment I knew I wasn't his substitute. I was his choice, and there's no greater honor. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Mention names of the characters in the story.